You've been lied to about your sensitivity. All your life they told you that feeling too much is a weakness, that caring too deeply will break you, that being the quiet observer in a loud world means you'll always be left behind. But here's what nobody tells you. The empath doesn't lose early in life. The empath is training early in life. While everyone else is busy talking, you're learning how to read energy. While they're chasing attention, you're mastering awareness. While they're reacting, you're analyzing. And that changes everything later. Because power doesn't come from being the loudest voice in the room. It comes from being the one who understands what no one else can see. In your younger years, it feels like a curse. You walk into a room and instantly feel tension that nobody is talking about. You sense fake smiles. You notice subtle disrespect. You pick up on intentions before words are even spoken. You were never weak for feeling more than others. You were just aware in a world that rewards numbness early and punishes depth before it understands its value. While others were moving through life on autopilot, reacting without thinking, speaking without sensing, you were absorbing everything. The tone behind the words, the tension behind the silence, the truth behind the smile. That wasn't a flaw, that was training your mind to detect what most people spend their entire lives missing. You noticed when someone said, "I'm fine," but their energy felt broken. You noticed when respect was fake, when kindness had conditions, when attention came with hidden motives. And at the time, it didn't feel like power, it felt like pressure, like carrying weight nobody else seemed to feel. Because when you can see more, you feel more. And when you feel more, it overwhelms you before it strengthens you. You questioned yourself constantly, wondering why you couldn't just be like everyone else, why you couldn't ignore things, why your mind kept analyzing moments long after they were over. But what you didn't realize is that every moment you spent overthinking, you were building pattern recognition at a level most people will never reach. You weren't just thinking, you were studying human behavior in real time. You were collecting data through emotions, storing experiences, mapping reactions, learning how people operate beneath their words. And while others relied on what was obvious, you were training yourself to read what was hidden. That's not weakness, that's advanced awareness developing without guidance. The problem was never your sensitivity. The problem was that nobody taught you how to control it. So instead of using it, you were drowning in it. Instead of directing your energy, you were giving it away to people who didn't value it. Instead of trusting your instincts, you were doubting them because the world kept telling you that logic matters more than feeling. But here's what changes everything. Your feelings were never random. They were signals. Signals that something was off. Signals that something was genuine. Signals that something deserved your attention or your distance. And every time you ignored those signals, life taught you a lesson through pain. Not to punish you, but to sharpen you. Every betrayal refined your judgment. Every disappointment strengthened your ability to read intentions. Every moment of being misunderstood forced you to understand yourself deeper. That's how your sensitivity evolves into intelligence. Because real intelligence is not just facts and logic, it's the ability to read reality beyond what is said. And you were developing that long before you had the confidence to trust it. You see, most people only understand what is directly in front of them. They need clear words, clear actions, obvious proof. But you learn to operate in the invisible space, the space where energy speaks before language, where intention reveals itself before action. That's why later in life, you don't need long explanations to understand people. You don't need time to figure out who someone really is. You feel it immediately, because your brain has been trained through years of emotional exposure. What once overwhelmed you becomes your advantage. What once confused you becomes your clarity. What once drained you becomes your filter. Because now you start to recognize patterns instantly. You see the same behaviors repeating in different people. You notice the same energy behind different words. And you stop giving people the benefit of the doubt when their actions don't align with their intentions. That's growth most people never reach. Because most people stay blind to patterns, they repeat the same mistakes, trust the same type of people, fall into the same cycles. But you break cycles because you see them forming before they trap you. That's power built through sensitivity. And the deeper truth is this: the reason it hurts so much in the beginning is because you are feeling without boundaries. You are open without filters. You are giving without limits. So of course it drains you. Of course it confuses you. Of course it makes you feel like something is wrong with you. But nothing is wrong. You were just untrained. Because once you learn to control where your attention goes, everything changes. You stop absorbing everything and start choosing what deserves your focus. You stop reacting to every emotion and start observing without attachment. You stop carrying other people's problems and start protecting your energy like it has value. And that's when your sensitivity becomes precision instead of pain. Now you're not overwhelmed, you're aware. Now you're not confused, you're certain. Now you're not weak, you're selective. You don't need to prove anything to anyone because you already understand what most people are still trying to figure out. You understand people at a level that cannot be faked. You understand situations before they unfold. You understand yourself in a way that creates unshakable confidence. And that confidence doesn't come from ego, it comes from experience. It comes from surviving emotional intensity and turning it into clarity. It comes from feeling everything and learning how to stand strong within it. That's why later in life, you move differently. You don't chase validation because you can feel authenticity. You don't fear rejection because you can sense misalignment early. You don't get easily manipulated because you recognize hidden intentions before they take shape. That's what all those years were building inside you. Not weakness, not fragility, not overthinking. They were building awareness, discipline, and internal strength that most people never develop because they never had to face themselves at that level. You did. And that's why you become powerful later. Because while others were comfortable staying shallow, you were forced to go deep. And depth always wins in the long run. The moment you stop giving your energy to everyone is the moment your life begins to change in a way most people will never experience. Because for so long you believed that being kind meant being available, that being understanding meant tolerating everything, that being empathetic meant sacrificing yourself just to keep the peace. And people took advantage of that without even thinking twice. Not always because they were evil, but because you made it easy. You showed up every time, you listened every time, you gave every time, even when you were running on empty. And slowly, without realizing it, you trained people how to treat you. You taught them that your time was always accessible, that your energy had no limits, that your presence came without conditions. And the more you gave, the less it was valued. That's the painful truth nobody tells you. Unprotected empathy invites disrespect. Not because empathy is weak, but because without boundaries, it has no structure. It flows everywhere, including places it should never go. So you found yourself drained after conversations, exhausted after helping others, emotionally tired from carrying things that were never yours to carry. And at some point, something inside you starts to resist. A quiet voice begins to question everything. Why am I always the one giving? Why do I feel empty after being there for everyone else? Why do people only come to me when they need something? That voice is the beginning of your transformation. Because awareness is the first boundary. You start noticing patterns you ignored before. You start realizing that some people don't actually value you, they value what you provide. Your attention, your support, your understanding. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. That's when the shift begins. You start pulling back, not out of anger, but out of clarity. You stop responding immediately. You stop saying yes to everything. You stop over-explaining yourself just to be understood. And at first, it feels uncomfortable. It feels wrong. Because you've spent so much time being the person who is always there. Now you're becoming someone who chooses when to be there. And people notice. Some will question you. Some will try to guilt you. Some will even call you selfish. But what they're really reacting to is the loss of access they once had to you. They were comfortable with the version of you that had no limits. The version of you that never said no. The version of you that gave without pause. But that version of you was unsustainable. That version of you was slowly disappearing under the weight of everyone else's expectations. And you finally decided to protect yourself. That's not selfish, that's survival. Because boundaries are not walls to shut people out, they are filters to let the right people in. They don't make you cold, they make you clear. They don't reduce your empathy, they refine it. Now your kindness is intentional, not automatic. Now your support is earned, not assumed. Now your energy is directed, not scattered. And this is where your power starts to become visible. Because when you are no longer available to everyone, your presence becomes valuable. Scarcity creates respect. Not because you're playing games, but because you finally understand your worth. You no longer tolerate inconsistency. You no longer ignore red flags. You no longer stay in situations that drain you just to avoid conflict. And that changes how people see you. They feel the shift in your energy immediately. You're calmer but more distant, kinder but more selective, present but not easily accessible. And that creates a different kind of respect. The kind that doesn't come from trying to impress people, but from showing them that your time and energy are not unlimited resources. You become someone people think twice about before crossing. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're no longer naive. You see through things now. You recognize manipulation before it fully reveals itself. You sense when someone is trying to take more than they give. And instead of confronting everything emotionally, you simply withdraw your energy. That's control. That's discipline. That's power most people never develop because they are too busy reacting. You stop reacting. You start choosing. And that changes everything. Because when you control your energy, you control your life. You decide who gets access to you. You decide what deserves your attention. You decide where your time is invested. And those decisions shape your reality. You're no longer at the mercy of other people's moods, expectations, or demands. You're operating from a place of self-respect. And self-respect is magnetic. People feel it without you saying a word. They sense that you're not easily influenced. They sense that you're not desperate for approval. They sense that your presence is grounded in something deeper than external validation. And that's when everything flips. The same people who once overlooked you start paying attention. The same people who took you for granted start treating you differently. The same people who drained you start respecting your distance. Not because you changed who you are at your core, but because you changed how you allow yourself to be treated. That's the real transformation. You didn't lose your empathy. You mastered it. You turned it from something that controlled you into something you control. You became someone who can feel deeply without losing themselves. Someone who can care without being consumed. Someone who can give without being emptied. And that balance is rare. Because most people exist in extremes. They either give too much and get hurt, or they shut down completely and stop feeling. But you found the middle ground. You found strength in awareness and discipline in emotion. And that makes you different. That makes you powerful. Because now, when you show up for someone, it's real. It's intentional. It's chosen. And that kind of presence cannot be faked, cannot be replaced, cannot be taken lightly. Most people spend their entire lives living on the surface, reacting to what is obvious, chasing what is visible, believing what is said without ever questioning what is meant. They move through conversations without listening, through relationships without understanding, through opportunities without awareness. And for a long time, it looks like they're winning. They're louder, faster, more confident on the outside. They get attention quickly. They make decisions quickly. They move without hesitation. But what looks like speed is often a lack of depth. What looks like confidence is often untested certainty. And what looks like success early on is often built on shallow foundations. Because when life becomes complex, when relationships become layered, when trust becomes the currency that everything depends on, surface-level thinking begins to collapse. And that's where you rise. Because you were never built for the surface. You were shaped in depth. Every moment you spent analyzing situations, questioning intentions, feeling beyond words, you were developing a level of perception that most people don't even realize exists. You weren't just seeing what people did, you were understanding why they did it. You weren't just hearing words, you were feeling the truth behind them. And that ability separates you in ways that become undeniable over time. Because later in life, everything that truly matters is built on understanding people. Not controlling them, not impressing them, but understanding them. Understanding what drives them, what scares them, what motivates them, what they hide. And that's where shallow minds struggle, because they rely on what is visible, and what is visible is often misleading. They trust appearances, they believe presentations, they fall for words that sound good instead of intentions that are real. But you don't operate like that anymore. You feel the inconsistency between what someone says and how they act. You notice the micro shifts in energy when someone is not being genuine. You recognize when respect is forced, when attention is conditional, when loyalty is temporary. And you don't need confirmation. You've trained your perception through years of experience. So while others are surprised by betrayal, you saw it forming long before it happened. While others are confused by sudden changes in behavior, you notice the subtle signs from the beginning. That's what depth gives you. Clarity before chaos, understanding before explanation, awareness before impact. And that awareness changes how you move through life. You stop chasing things that look good on the surface, but feel wrong underneath. You stop entertaining connections that lack authenticity. You stop investing time in people who cannot meet you at your level of understanding. Because you've learned that depth requires alignment. And alignment cannot exist where there is only surface. So your circle becomes smaller, but your connections become stronger. Your conversations become more meaningful. Your decisions become more precise, and your life becomes more intentional. Because you're no longer reacting to what is in front of you, you're responding to what is real. And real is not always visible to everyone. That's why people don't always understand you. They see your decisions, but they don't see the depth of awareness behind them. They hear your silence, but they don't understand the clarity within it. They feel your distance, but they don't realize it's built on discernment, not indifference. And that's okay, because depth is not meant to be understood by everyone. It's meant to guide you. It's meant to protect you. It's meant to elevate you into spaces where surface-level thinking cannot survive. Because in the long run, everything comes down to trust. In relationships, in business, in leadership, in influence. And trust is not built on surface interactions. It's built on consistency, authenticity, and emotional intelligence. And those are your strengths. You don't just connect with people, you understand them. You don't just communicate, you resonate. You don't just lead, you influence at a level that goes beyond words. And that creates something most people chase but rarely achieve: genuine respect. Not the kind that comes from status or noise, but the kind that comes from presence. The kind that makes people listen when you speak. The kind that makes people trust you without needing constant proof. The kind that cannot be faked because it is felt, not performed. And that's why, over time, the roles begin to reverse. The ones who relied on surface-level skills start to plateau. They struggle to build meaningful connections. They struggle to maintain trust. They struggle to navigate complexity because they never developed the depth required to understand it. But you thrive in complexity because you've lived in it, you've learned from it, you've mastered how to stay grounded while everything around you becomes uncertain. And that stability becomes your advantage. Because in a world full of noise, clarity stands out. In a world full of performance, authenticity stands out. In a world full of distraction, awareness stands out. And you carry all of that within you. Not because you tried to, but because your journey forced you to. Every moment of overthinking refined your perception. Every emotional experience expanded your understanding. Every challenge deepened your awareness of yourself and others. And now, that depth becomes the foundation of everything you build. Your relationships are stronger because they are rooted in truth. Your decisions are sharper because they are guided by insight. Your presence is more powerful because it is grounded in authenticity. And that's something surface-level minds cannot replicate. Because depth is earned, not imitated. It is built through experience, through reflection, through facing things most people avoid. And you've done that. You've gone where others refuse to go within themselves. You've confronted emotions others suppress. You've questioned realities others blindly accept. And that gives you an edge that becomes more valuable with time. Because while the world keeps evolving, human nature remains complex. And the ones who understand that complexity will always have the advantage.